Hello, I'm Devin Albertson of Missouri 8-Man Football, and today I want to present our 2023 Missouri 8-Man Football All-State Awards. We do ours different than the coaches. The coaches have their own award system. Me and Anthony, we wanted to be able to present our own awards there for the kids that we've seen around the state and recognize the kids that we thought were deserving for the All-State team. We've seen a lot of the kids from around the state going to multiple games a week on there, so we think we have a pretty good pulse of who the top players are. Our format, as we get into it here in a minute, for offense and defense, we give out 9 players per team, 3 teams total, so 27 on offense, 27 on defense, plus 8 other additional awards at the end. So on offense, we give it out for quarterback, all-purpose back, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and then 3 offensive linemen for a total of 9. For defense, 3 D linemen, 1 defensive lineman / linebacker, 3 more linebackers, and then 2 defensive backs for a total of 9 for each one of them. And then the other awards we give out a Coach of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Special Teams Player of the Year, and then Best Senior, Best Junior, Best Sophomore, Best Freshman. So we'll get to the awards here, put them up on the screen, and I'll talk a little bit about each one of them and kind of our thought process to go along with the kids that we did honor here. And again, only 54 spots there for the first, second, and third teams. A lot of great players across the state. Some guys that we really hated leaving off this list here. But this is who we ended up settling on for our top All-State awards here from Missouri8ManFootball.com. Enjoy. So we're going to start off today with the first team quarterback, Tyler New from Worth County, the senior. Over 3,000 yards of total offense this year for the senior quarterback. Also 67 touchdowns, tied 4th in the state going into the state semifinals. Just a fantastic player all around, just one of the best athletes there at quarterback in the entire state. All-purpose back, Cole Metzger. 3,700 yards from scrimmage this year, 79 touchdowns going into the state semifinals. He leads the state in rushing yards, 1,800 yards, and rushing touchdowns with 40. A no-brainer for us for all-purpose back there for us. At running back, Cash Anderson was the regular season champion for rushing yards, had 1,700 yards this year, almost 1,800, averaging 177 yards per game. He also had 33 rushing touchdowns, kind of a no-brainer for us as well there at running back. Sam Jones from Osceola, over 1,400 yards rushing this year. Just a fantastic player there for Osceola. 22 touchdowns. A kid we had last year for All-State came back this year. Led Osceola to their first winning season in years there for the Indians. Just a fantastic player that we wanted to honor there on the first team. Receiver, Mason Humphrey was kind of a no-brainer for us for first team. Leads the state with 1,704 receiving yards, 31 touchdowns, and has 100 receptions on the season. Just fantastic player, impossible to scheme against there for Mason Humphrey. He is on ours first team as well. Griffin Houston, right behind him, 1,672 yards receiving this year, 28 touchdowns, 110 receptions. Again, another fantastic player that we could not leave off the first team receiver. 3 big guys up front for first team offensive line: Elias Alarcon of Worth County, Braden Daniels, the junior from Archie, and then Peyton Simmons from North Andrew. All guys, when we talk to people around the state for offensive line, first names that kind of brought up were Alarcon, Daniels, and Simmons. So we wanted to honor those 3 guys as kind of the best 3 linemen this year for our offensive side. For defense, very similar names here on the first team as well for defensive line. Elias Alarcon and Peyton Simmons made the defensive line as well, along with Brock Smith from Archie. Just one of the best defensive ends in the state there. Those 3 were no-brainers for us. Avery Miller from North Andrew, the junior, played D-line and linebacker this year for North Andrew. He was fantastic, a game record there for the Cardinals, a guy that we could not leave off the All-State team this year. Kendall Nolan, the linebacker, there for South Holt. Gage Iddings for Pattonsburg. 2 linebackers who are seniors that definitely led the way for their teams, and just 2 of the best linebackers we've seen all year for those guys. Kendall Nolan, he had 126 tackles, I believe, here so far this year. 126 tackles to go along with 24 tackles for loss, tied for the state lead with 13 sacks. Just start to finish, one of the best players in the state there, the middle linebacker there for South Holt. Again, one of the best defenses in the state there for South Holt. And Gage Iddings, I believe he had 146 tackles, was the man there for Pattonsburg. If they got to stop, it was because of him on defense. We had to leave him on there as well at linebacker. Then TJ Munter was our 3rd first-team all-linebacker. Just a monster there for Drexel. 126 tackles, led the state with 39 tackles for loss. Just all over the field there for Drexel. Also had 5 sacks. Just start to finish, one of the best linebackers we saw all year. Defensive backs, Aiden Blackford for Platte Valley, the senior, and then Ethan Dayringer for Drexel. Dayringer 122 tackles for him. He also had a few interceptions this year as well. I believe it was 3. And just start to finish, he wrecked things on defense there for you. If it wasn't Munter or Drexel or Dayringer making the tackle for Drexel, they weren't really getting stops. And then Aiden Blackford for Platte Valley. He's a kid we wanted to put on there for quarterback, just couldn't quite fit him on there. He's just a kid that just made so many plays for that defense. Played part of the year with a broken nose. Didn't really matter that he was just that tough and just that great of a play. He was a kid that we think deserved a first-team All-State spot there for defensive back this season. Now we go to second team here, quarterback Jordan Haley from Bramer, the junior, 4,518 yards so far going into the semifinal game, 94 passing touchdowns. Also has 29 rushing touchdowns this year to go along with 1,400 yards rushing. He was a monster on the stat sheets there, just under 6,000 yards of offense, nearly 500 yards a game, 123 touchdowns. For sure, an all-state quarterback here for us. We have him second-team quarterback, with Briar McIntyre being the other guy here for Archie. Best player on probably the best team in the state going into the Final Four here, we think. Just under 1,900 yards of offense this year and 50 touchdowns. He don't have the same stats as some of the other guys who are going to be quarterback and all-purpose back here for him, but with the way their defense was playing this year, he didn't have to play a whole bunch in the second half there for the games, and they kind of were able to rest him a little bit there for it, so that's probably what kept him from having a chance to the first-team spot there, but he was too good of a player for us to leave off the second-team all-purpose back there for Briar McIntyre. The running backs, Elliott Sevitz for Schuyler County. Absolute monster this year, just over 1,700 yards rushing to go along with 32 touchdowns. He was a monster there for Schuyler County. Gave them another aspect of their offense this year we didn't see in the past. So he was a kid we wanted to honor here on the second team all-conference. Tucker Singer from Southwest Livingston, the senior. Another great player, 1,500 yards through the regular season there. He also had a couple of great playoff games there. He's probably close to 2,000 yards rushing this year when it was all said and done. Just waiting a couple of games of stats for him still. He also had 17 touchdowns going into the playoffs there. Just a great player there for Southwest Livingston that we had to include here for the second team All-State. At running back, just a monster, also a great shot putter there in track season. At tight ends, we have Grant McIntyre from Worth County. Not a whole bunch of receiving yards this year, only 600 yards receiving, but he does have 19 touchdowns on the season. Just a great player there for Worth County that pretty much when he catches the ball, it's going to be a touchdown. He had 29 receptions and 19 touchdowns. Just an absolute monster there. Great blocker as well there for Worth County. And then Ethan Dayringer from Drexel, just under 1,000 yards receiving this year. Touchdowns weren't where they have been in the past with 12 receiving touchdowns, but if you watched him play week in, week out with 79 receptions, he was a kid that was so hard to game plan down there in the South. A great player there. And Dayringer, the senior, also a second-team all-conference receiver. Offensive line, Tristan Haas from Concordia, junior. Big boy moving things there for Concordia. Great turnaround for them. We want to honor one of their best linemen here on the second team all-conference. Riley Greening for North Shelby. Another great blocker there for North Shelby. Had to put a lot of points on offense. Couldn't quite get some of their skill guys on here, but he was a guy who definitely made things run there for the offensive line. And then Bryce Martin from Albany. Another really, really solid offensive lineman there for the Warriors and Coach Fountain. Second team, Colin Headland, a defensive line for East Atchison. Just an absolute monster season for Headland. Teams ran away from him a little bit this year, but he was still able to rack up a great season as he was able to tally 21 tackles for loss, which is a fantastic player defensive end there for East Atchison. Had to leave him on here for second team. Braden Daniels from Archie. Not the best stats here overall if you look at him from a stats standpoint, but if you watched him and just watched the eye test, 41 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, also had an interception, a couple fumble recoveries, just a monster in the middle of that defense there for him, there at defensive tackle for Coach Drew Smith and Archie, only a junior as well. And then Trace Millen from South Holt, another kid who just is a monster in the middle of that defensive line, who gave teams fits year in, year out. That we wanted to include here for it. On defense, he had 84 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, and 7 sacks, a forced fumble, and 2 fumble recoveries. It's a fantastic player there in the middle of that Knights defense that was very good this year. At D-line / linebacker, Jaden Maggart from St. Paul. He's been a mainstay for the last 3 years for us in the All-State team. 150 tackles this year. Just a fantastic football player. This is your prototypical Mike linebacker that we had to include on here. Just a wonderful football player that we're going to miss dearly here in Missouri 8-Man Football covering him. Just a great kid as well. Briar McIntyre from Archie. Leading linebacker, the best defense in the state. Enough said, 102 tackles, 4 tackles for loss. Stats don't do his justice for what he brings to that middle of that defense. He brings an edge on defense there for them. Very similar there with Tyler New from Worth County. He's a leader of that defense as well as the offense. 95 tackles, a sack. They don't do tackles for loss at Worth County, but he's right up there, and teams ran away from him enough this year. He was able to kind of float between linebacker and defensive back depending on the team they played there. Just all the coaches I talked to said he should be one of the guys to consider there at linebacker. Lucas Frisch led the team in tackles, but New was kind of the leader of that defense, so we gave the nod to Tyler New. Another linebacker spot, Hank Eggerman from Lockwood. Don't have his stats from the playoff game there versus Archie, but he was fantastic this year. He played defensive back last year, moved to linebacker this year, and rewarded well. 159 tackles, 21 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 5 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles, and 3 fumble recoveries. So far, just a wonderful player there for Lockwood. Hank Eggerman definitely deserves this honor. Then going up next, defensive back Quincy Basil from Liberal. Just a wonderful player there in the back end. I had one coach tell me the best cover guy he has played against all year. 74 tackles, had 4 interceptions, but he was just a guy who just locked things down in the back end there for Liberal. Just a wonderful football player there. They're going to miss him dearly there for the Bulldogs. And then finally, last but not least, on the second team, Isaiah Howard at defensive back. Tied for the lead. State lead in interceptions with 7 this year. Had a couple of pick sixes, 81 tackles, and also had 9 tackles for loss, a sack, and 4 forced fumbles. Had another one there versus Southold. Just a great player there on defense as well for Plattsburgh. So that's the end of the second team. We will go on to the third team next. And going to the third team, starting at quarterback, Gage Iddings from Pattonsburg. 4,245 yards this year. Actually led the state in yards per game at 486 yards per game. Had 58 passing touchdowns. Was the offense there at Pattonsburg this year. Over 4,800 yards total offense. 440 yards per game, which is second most in the state, only behind Haley. Also had 73 touchdowns, which is the most until the playoffs kind of hit around. Then Mesker passed him there for Southold. But a kid that Anthony really fought for. He wanted him here on the third team, so Anthony got it there. Gage Iddings there, senior quarterback there for Pattonsburg. And then Isaiah Howard was our all-purpose back, third team here. Howard, fantastic player in his only year in 8-man football. Threw for 2,336 yards and go along with 39 touchdowns. Also had a nice year running as well, 23 touchdowns rushing to go along with about 900 yards rushing on the year as well. So he was just a fantastic player. If you watched him, he just jumped off the screen. Over 3,200 yards of offense and 67 touchdowns. Any other given year, he's probably a first-team All-Stater. Just a lot of great quarterbacks there to deal with this year. Just a physical freak. Good luck to Isaiah Howard going forward, playing Division I basketball at North Dakota State. Future Bison there for him. Just one fantastic player we had to enjoy covering this year. Anthony and I did. Third-team all-purpose back. Nick Tiemann, running back from Lockwood, was the third-team running back here for us as a junior. 1,583 yards, 144 yards per game for Tiemann. 32 rushing touchdowns. He had a great game versus Archie in the playoffs. Had 4 receiving touchdowns as well there. Just a fantastic athlete, a hard runner there. We were always impressed with Tiemann there for Lockwood this season. Caden Sutton from Archie come up next. 900 yards rushing this year. Just a really, really fun player there for him as well. For Archie, it wasn't just him running the ball; he was great out of the backfield as well. As he was second on the team in rushing, 905 yards rushing, 17 touchdowns. Also had 472 yards receiving and 12 touchdowns through the air for a total this year of 1,377 yards and 33 total touchdowns, including his defensive scores there for Sutton. Just a fantastic player that if they had more snaps on offense, that was all in just 74 touches on the year. So he averaged over 18 yards per touch there for Archie. Just a wonderful football player that definitely deserves to be on this third-team All-State running back. Receivers, Landon Preston from Pattonsburg. We talked about Iddings earlier. Well, his main go-to guy was Preston. Over 1,500 yards receiving, 140 yards per game. He also had 18 receiving touchdowns and led the state with 115 receptions on the year. Just a really fun player, and the people knew he was getting the ball there for him, and he would still go up and get it and make big plays there for Pattonsburg on offense. So we wanted to give Landon Preston here on the third-team receiver. And then Quincy Basil from Liberal, talking about for defensive back. He also had 1,019 yards receiving, 6th in the state. I believe that may have been a school record for them as well. He also had 16 receiving touchdowns and 55 receptions. Just start from finish, a explosive receiver there for Liberal that we wanted to include here on the third team receiver list. A lot of great receivers you had to leave off here. Unfortunately, a great year for receivers across Missouri State 8-man football. The lineman, Jackson Schaefer from South Holt, the senior, missed last few games of the year due to an injury there, but he was a monster for South Holt. We thought he should be on there for offensive lineman. He had too good of a season not to include him at offensive line. Landon Wiederholt at Platte Valley kind of made that offense go on the ground there for him. Was a great blocker this year and kind of led that unit. And then Ace Akers, the junior from Schuyler County, a mammoth of a blocker that really kind of set the tone for them up front there this season. And we had a couple of the guys we want to include on here. Just O-line's a really deep position. Only had 9 guys to choose from, so that's where we had to stop there with Ace Akers. Going to defense, defensive line. Landon Lankar from Concordia, the junior, fantastic year here for the Orioles, kind of helping them turn around. A couple of great defenders there with him, with Feeney and Inman that we couldn't quite include here because the deep linebacker group was so tough there. But Lankar, 88 tackles, 19 tackles for loss, 10 sacks. Just a wonderful player there for them, and he's going to be back next year, only a junior. So our Feeney and Inman should expect big things out of Concordia next season. Tate Johnson for East Atchison, only a sophomore, somehow wasn't on the all-conference list there for the 275. I couldn't figure it out. 25 tackles for loss this year, had 90-some tackles. A sack and a half there. Didn't have many sacks there, but he was a game wrecker there for East Atchison on the defensive line. The kid that we had to include on here. He was just too good of a game wrecker not to include as one of the best 9 defensive linemen in the state. And then Mason Eiler, one of Anthony's guys here for us, had a great season for Liberal. Had a bunch of guys who put up some big numbers on defense there for him this year. And Mason was one of the very few there with it. 61 tackles, but 17 tackles for loss and 12 sacks there with him. He was fantastic on that defensive line there for Liberal. Was top 3 in the state in sacks there on defense. So this is one of Anthony's guys that he wanted to include on here for the all-state list. Was 3rd in the state in sacks. Next, defensive line / linebacker Tanner Dorman from Sweet Springs. Had to get a Sweet Springs guy on here. 127 tackles this season. He was everywhere on that defense for Sweet Springs. Just a monster of a linebacker there for you. Kind of very similar to Maggart there for St. Paul, where it's just like this guy is going to be the leader of our defensive front there. And he's going to be able to set the tone for us going forward this year. A kid that probably could have been All-State last year for them as well if it wasn't for Blake Schrader there at linebacker. He got 127 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 2 interceptions, a forced fumble, and 2 fumble recoveries. I think he was the Defensive Player of the Year also in the Central River I-70 division. No-brainer there for Tanner Dorman. Up next, Brody Wilson, another Liberal guy here for us. 158 tackles this season. Just all over the field there for him. I know every time Anthony turned on the film there for Liberal, he was all over it there for them. 12 tackles for loss. Just a fantastic player there for Liberal. We want to include Brody Wilson here for third team All-State linebacker. Isaiah Kohlers from Schuyler County, 132 tackles this year. Really set the tone for them defensively. I think he got hurt last year, so missed part of the season. Him being back this year really helped their defense out this season. We want a guy that's definitely should be included on here for the All-State defense. 132 tackles, 15 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and 2 fumble recoveries. And then Lucas Walker from Oric, another guy who kind of flew on the radar a little bit. I know Jackson Miller is always the big name over there, but due to injuries, Lucas Walker really stepped up this year. Led the team with 127 tackles, 3 interceptions, had a sack, and 2 fumble recoveries. Just a really fun player in the middle of that defense that struggled at times, but it wasn't because of Lucas Walker. He was a fantastic player this year for Oric, and he is just a sophomore, so a couple more years for him still there as a Bearcat. And defensive backs, last 2, Tylen Prusman from South Holt. Unanimous, all first team, all 275 conference this year. He does have 8 interceptions on the year, which is 2nd in the state. I think tied 3rd in the state, actually what it is. 59 tackles, 8 tackles for loss. Just a very fast guy in the back of that defense for South Holt that definitely deserves to be on here. And then finally, last but not least, Mason Humphrey for defensive back. I believe he was the North Division Defensive Player of the Year this year. 59 tackles, 7 interceptions, a forced fumble and 2 fumble recoveries. Just a really good player in the back end of that defense. As part of their trifecta back there on the defensive end. So Schuyler County's Mason Humphrey. And that gets to the end of our first, second, and third teams. Take a quick break. When we come back, we had the 8 individual awards coming up next. And now time for the individual awards. We start with Coach of the Year. We're going to go with Southolt's Josh Peterson, undefeated record this year. First district championship for Southolt since 2004. And Anthony, I think that he's gotten everything he could out of these kids this year. And just a fantastic Cinderella season for Southolt, undefeated, getting a host of state semifinal. We'll see what they do versus Worth County. But Josh Peterson is our Missouri 8-Man football Coach of the Year for 2023. Beat out some really great candidates there for that one. Our Offensive Player of the Year, Jordan Haley from Bramer. I mean, he's got 130 touchdowns this year. He's kind of a no-brainer for the Offensive Player of the Year. If you think offense, you think Jordan Haley from Bramer, a kid that we had to include here. He was second-team quarterback, but we think he was the Offensive Player of the Year. Defensive Player of the Year, Kendall Nolan from Southold. We talked about him earlier on defense. We think he's the best linebacker, probably one of the best defenses. Just kind of the guy who stood out the most there on the defense side of the ball as a game changer on defense in 2023. Our Special Teams Player of the Year, Dakota Evans, Rockport. I think he had 5 or 6 return touchdowns for this year. He was an absolute game changer on that side of the ball. Had them versus Noe Valley, 2 more in the playoffs versus Mound City. Just kind of a kid that could change the game in that aspect of the game. We want to give Dakota Evans from Rockport our Special Teams Player of the Year. Best Senior, we're going with Tyler New for Worth County. This came down to New, Howard, and McIntyre. We just thought New edged out McIntyre just slightly there with that one, but a bunch of fantastic people here to choose from for Senior of the Year. We chose Tyler New, quarterback and linebacker from Worth County. Best Junior, we chose Cole Metzger from Southold, the quarterback/linebacker for the Knights. We think just offensively and defensively did one of the best jobs there as a junior this year, and we wanted to include him as our best junior. He was best junior. Jordan Haley was Offensive Player of the Year. That was kind of the concession we made there for those two. Best sophomore, leading rusher, first-team All-State running back, Cash Anderson for Appleton City. There's a kid that beat out a couple of really good players there that made the All-State team, whether it was Tate Johnson or Lucas Walker, who were both sophomores this year. Just Cash Anderson kind of stood above the rest. And then Freshman of the Year, North Shelby's Gannon Bowen here for us. It's kind of a out of left field a little bit here, but when you look what he did this year for North Shelby as a freshman, just a fantastic season. Not just defensively, where he had 102 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 5 interceptions, and 2 forced fumbles. Second in the team in tackles this year as a freshman. Also, he threw for 100 yards. He ran for 433 and 4 touchdowns. Had another 188 yards receiving and a touchdown, but had 11 total touchdowns. He had 6 in the return game, whether it's defensive or special teams there for him. So Gannon Bowen is our Freshman of the Year from Missouri 8-Man Football. That is our 2023 Missouri 8-Man Football All-State team. I want to thank Anthony for helping me out with the list there. Thank all the coaches for their responses via email when I sent that out a few weeks ago to get their input on this. We want to get as much information as possible between us watching the games, us watching huddle film, coaches, what they talk about their game planning and stuff like that. A lot of great players that did not make this list that we could go on and on about. But we had to cut the line off on somewhere. So thank you to everyone who did this. Last year we did patches for the kids. We're going to try to do that again this year, but we need to raise funding for that because the patches do cost money, and Anthony and I can't keep spending that out of our pocket there for them. So we'd love to get the patches to the kids. We're going to send out a link there for a GoFundMe or a Venmo, some way for us to get that money to Anthony. That way he could possibly purchase the patches this year. We want to do that for the kids, so if you guys would like to donate for that, we would much appreciate it, so we can honor these kids. So they can put these patches on their jackets, so they can have them as they go forward in life on there. These is a great honor for the kids. I want to thank each and one of the kids there for their great efforts, their many years of right there. Good luck to all the teams in the state semifinal, state championship game. But again, this is our 2023 Missouri8ManFootball.com All-State team.